The night my marriage died, it did so without fanfare. There was no shouting, no slamming of doors, no theatrical throwing of a wine glass against the wall. It expired quietly, at the dinner table, under the soft, unforgiving glow of the chandelier. We were sitting in a silence that had become a third entity in our home, a heavy, gelatinous thing that filled the spaces between our words. For weeks, Amelia had been distant, a planet slowly drifting out of my gravitational pull. I had told myself it was a phase, a rough patch, one of the many mundane seasons of a long marriage. Everyone has them, right? You just lower your head, weather the storm, and wait for the sun to return. I was a fool. I had been preparing for rain, while a tidal wave was gathering just offshore. That night, something in her eyes had changed. They were not filled with the familiar shadows of anger or sadness. They were blank, cold. The eyes of a stranger looking at a piece of furniture she no longer had any use for. Then she spoke the words, not as a confession, but as a statement of fact, as if announcing the weather. He makes me feel alive. 6 words. 8 years of marriage, of shared dreams and private jokes, of building a life, a home, a history. All of it was reduced to rubble by 6 simple words. My fork, laden with a piece of chicken I no longer wanted, hovered halfway to my mouth. My mind scrambled to catch up, to reassemble the sounds into something less devastating. It was a futile effort. The meaning was clear, precise, and aimed directly at my heart. What? My voice was a stranger's, steadier than the tremor in my hand. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. There was no softening of the blow, no gentle preamble. This was an execution, and she was the unflinching executioner. Ethan makes me feel alive, she repeated. Her voice was calm, deliberate, each word a perfectly polished stone dropped into the placid, stagnant waters of our life. She had rehearsed this. The thought was a fresh, chilling violation. I stared at her, searching for a trace of the woman I knew. The Amelia who had once laughed so hard at one of my terrible puns that she'd snorted lemonade out of her nose. The Amelia who had held my hand for 12 straight hours while my father was in surgery. That woman was gone. In her place sat this cold, resolute stranger who had already packed her bags emotionally, even if they were still physically in our closet. A primal urge to yell, to scream, to demand an accounting for this betrayal rose in my throat, hot and bitter, but it died before it could reach my lips. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as the weight of her declaration crushed the air from my lungs. How long? I finally managed, the words scraping my throat raw. She shrugged, a small, dismissive gesture, as if the timeline of her deceit was a trivial detail. A few months. It doesn't change how I feel. Of course it didn't. Why would it? She wasn't the one being ambushed. She'd had months to prepare, to build her justifications, to recast herself as the heroine of this story, escaping a life of quiet desperation. I see, I said. The voice was hollow, an echo from an empty room. I didn't recognize it as my own. She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her tone softening into one of condescending pity. It was a calculated move, meant to frame her as the compassionate one in this tragedy she had authored. I don't want to hurt you, James. I need to feel something again. Something more. Something more. So that's what I had become. Not enough. A placeholder. The steady, unremarkable backdrop for the grand, vibrant drama of her life. I nodded slowly. A marionette whose strings had just been cut, forcing my emotions down, packing them into a small, tight ball deep in my chest. And Ethan, he gives you that? Her lips, the same lips I had kissed that morning, curled into a small, almost apologetic smile. It was the most obscene expression I had ever seen. Yes, he makes me feel alive, in a way I haven't felt in years. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Each one a precision strike, cutting deeper than the last. She hadn't just left me. She had nullified our entire existence together. Every moment we'd shared, every promise we'd made, was now reframed as a period of dormancy, a life half-lived. I pushed my chair back, the harsh scrape of its legs on the hardwood floor a violent scream in the suffocating quiet. I stood. Well, I said, forcing the words through a throat thick with unsaid things. I hope he keeps you feeling alive. For a moment, a flicker of something, regret, surprise, crossed her face, but it was gone in an instant. She stood too, smoothing down her dress with a practiced air, as if preparing for a business meeting. "I'll stay with Claire tonight," she said, naming her best friend. "I'll come by tomorrow to get my things." And just like that, it was done. No tears. No final, desperate argument. No room for negotiation. She picked up her purse from the counter, walked to the front door, and left. She didn't look back. I stood in the dining room for what could have been minutes or hours, staring at the empty space where she had been. The house was too quiet, too still, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Her words echoed in the vacuum she'd left behind. "He makes me feel alive." That night, I did not cry. I did not rage. I simply sat on the couch in the dark, a glass of whiskey in one hand and my wedding ring in the other. I stared at the simple gold band as if it were an ancient artifact whose language I could no longer decipher. I had let her walk away without a fight. But deep down, in the cold, quiet place where my heart used to be, I knew this wasn't the end. She could feel alive for now, but not for long. After she walked out, the house became a hostile territory. Every object was a landmine of memory. The indent on her side of the sofa, the half-finished book on the nightstand, the scent of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom. It was all a relentless assault. I replayed her words until they lost all meaning and were just a cruel, rhythmic chant in my head. "He makes me feel alive." She hadn't framed it as a mistake, but as a salvation. A salvation from what? From me? From the quiet, steady life I thought we were building? I wasn't a cruel man. I wasn't neglectful. I was reliable. And apparently, in Amelia's world, reliability was a death sentence. My phone buzzed, startling me from my stupor. It was Marcus. I almost let it ring. The thought of putting voice to my new reality was exhausting. But it buzzed again, insistent. "What?" I said, my voice a rough and used thing. "Well, hello to you too," he replied, his tone light but cautious. "Lisa called me. About Amelia. Are you okay?" Was I okay? It was a question from a different universe. "Not really," I said. "I'm sorry, man," Marcus said, his voice losing its levity. "Do you want to talk about it?" She left. "She's with him now." I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. The ice clinked. It was the only other sound in the room. "Him. Ethan." I spat the name. It felt like poison on my tongue. Her soulmate. The guy who makes her feel alive. Marcus let out a low whistle. "That's cold. I don't know what to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I replied. I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't hers in my head. "You are enough, James," Marcus said, his voice firm. "She's the one who screwed up." His words were meant to be a comfort, but they felt like hollow platitudes. I ended the call before he could offer more. I didn't want pity. I didn't want a shoulder to cry on. What was growing in the ruins of my heart was not grief. It was something colder, sharper. It was the desire for a reckoning. Not messy, emotional revenge. Something calculated, precise, surgical. Amelia had demolished our life. I would not let her walk away from the blast zone unscathed. I spent the rest of the night not grieving, but studying. When had it started? What were the signs I missed? And more importantly, who was this man, this Ethan, who could offer her a feeling so potent it was worth destroying a marriage? I didn't know much about him, only that he'd joined her company 6 months ago. I remembered seeing him at a holiday party, tall, handsome in a polished, manufactured way, with a salesman's smile and eyes that were always scanning the room for the next opportunity. He was a cliché, a walking trope of the charming interloper. Amelia thought he was her escape from the mundane. She thought he was a thrill. She didn't know him, but I was going to. I was going to learn everything about him. I was going to dissect his life, find his weaknesses, and use them to turn her grand adventure into a cautionary tale. I would let her have her fantasy. I would let her bask in the glow of feeling alive. But I would be there, in the shadows, waiting. She had lit the match. I was going to fan the flames until her new world was nothing but ash. The first step in any strategic campaign is intelligence gathering. Ethan was my target, and I needed to know his terrain, his history, his vulnerabilities. Men like him, men who live on the surface, who trade in charm and curated images, always leave a digital trail. His social media was a monument to narcissism, a gallery of a life lived for an audience. Photos of him on a yacht, glass of champagne in hand, him leaning against a sports car that was probably a rental, him at exclusive restaurants, the food secondary to the performance of being there. It was all a carefully constructed facade of success and effortless cool. There was no depth, no real connection, just a series of posed moments designed to elicit envy. He wasn't building a life, he was building a brand. But this was just the surface. I needed to know what lay beneath. I called Marcus, not as a friend this time, but as a client. He had left the force years ago to start his own private investigation firm. He was discreet, thorough, and had a network of contacts that reached into the darkest corners of the city. "I was waiting for this call," he said when I explained what I wanted. "I knew you wouldn't just let this go." "I'm not looking for dirt to sling in a divorce court, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "This isn't about that. I need to understand who he is. If Amelia thinks this man is worth everything we built, I need to see the foundation he's standing on." Marcus chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. "Guys like this, their foundations are usually built on sand and bullshit. Give me a couple of days." While Marcus worked, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I went to work. I went to the gym. I ate. I slept. But it was all automatic, the actions of a body whose soul was elsewhere, waiting. The house was a constant, oppressive reminder. I started the process of boxing up Amelia's things, but my heart wasn't in it. It felt premature. This wasn't about erasing her yet. It was about preparing the battlefield. The call from Marcus came 3 days later. "You were right to be suspicious," he began, foregoing any pleasantries. "Your boy Ethan isn't just a charming suit. He's a professional, a serial homewrecker." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean, professional?" "I mean he has a pattern, a very specific MO. He targets successful, married women. Women who are maybe a little bored, a little unfulfilled. He becomes their confidant, their escape. He showers them with attention, makes them feel like the most fascinating creature on the planet. Makes them feel alive." I finished for him, the words tasting like acid. "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "And once he has them, once they've left their husbands and their stable lives for him, he starts the second phase, which is the financial bleed. It starts small. Can you cover dinner? My card's acting up? Then it's bigger things. I have this amazing investment opportunity, but I'm a little short on capital." He convinces them to buy him expensive gifts, co-sign on loans, even open joint accounts. And then, when the money runs out or things get too complicated, he vanishes. Poof, gone, leaving them with a broken heart and a mountain of debt. A dark, cold satisfaction settled in my stomach. So this was the man who had replaced me. Not a soulmate. A parasite. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "Oh, I've got proof," Marcus said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. I tracked down 2 of his previous conquests. One in Boston, one here in the city. Both tell the exact same story. I've got copies of bank statements, text messages, even a couple of fraud charges that were filed and then mysteriously dropped, probably because he had enough dirt on them to ensure their silence. The guy is a walking, talking scam artist. I leaned back in my chair, the plan that had been a vague, shadowy form in my mind now snapping into sharp, brutal focus. Amelia thought she had found a thrilling new romance. She had no idea she had just walked into a predator's trap, and the predator had no idea that his prey's husband was now watching him. That night, I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours for the first time since she left. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a player in the game. Ethan thought he was the one pulling the strings, making Amelia dance to his tune. He was about to find out there was another puppet master in the wings. He had made her feel alive. I was going to make them both wish they'd never met. The foundation of Ethan's power was his illusion, the image of the successful, exciting, spontaneous man who could rescue women from their mundane lives. My strategy was not to attack Amelia, but to dismantle the illusion she had fallen for. I would not confront her, or plead with her, or even show her the evidence. That would be too easy. She would see it as the act of a jealous, spurned husband. No, she had to discover the truth for herself. I would simply provide the breadcrumbs that would lead her to the precipice of her own catastrophic mistake. My first move was financial. It was the most immediate and tangible way to apply pressure. With the help of my lawyer, a shark named Grayson, I moved swiftly. The joint accounts were frozen, pending legal review of suspicious activity, a claim bolstered by the preliminary evidence Marcus had gathered on Ethan's financial history. The house, which was in both our names, was put under a legal injunction. Grayson filed a motion arguing that, given the circumstances of the separation and the presence of a financially predatory third party, the asset was at risk. Amelia could not sell her half. She could not leverage it for a loan. The monument to our life was now a gilded cage she couldn't access. She would feel the pinch soon enough. Ethan's lifestyle was expensive, and without my passive funding, the cracks would start to show. Next, I turned my attention to Ethan's network of victims. Marcus had already spoken to Sarah from Boston and Elena from our city. I reached out to them personally. I didn't want revenge on their behalf. I wanted an alliance. He is doing the exact same thing to my wife, I explained to Sarah over a video call. Her face was hard, the lines around her eyes a testament to the stress he had put her through. He is draining her resources, and he will discard her, just like he did to you. I am not asking you to fight my battle. I am asking if you are interested in getting some form of justice for yours. It took some convincing. The shame and humiliation ran deep. But the idea of preventing him from doing it again, and of seeing him finally face consequences, was a powerful motivator. Both women, and eventually a third Marcus tracked down, agreed to provide notarized statements detailing their experiences with Ethan, the romantic manipulation followed by the financial exploitation. With this arsenal of evidence, I began the subtle campaign of psychological warfare. I didn't want to blow up Ethan's life all at once. I wanted it to crumble, slowly, so Amelia could witness every stage of the decay. I started by creating anonymous online profiles. On local community forums, review websites for the upscale restaurants they frequented, and social media groups dedicated to city life, I began to drop hints. A comment here, a post there. Anyone else have a bad experience with a businessman named Ethan Thorne? Seems charming, but watch your wallet. Asterisk. Warning to the women of this city. There's a con artist who preys on married women. Drives a black convertible, frequents places like the Gilded Lily. Be careful. Asterisk. At first, they were just whispers, easily dismissed. But then, other people started to chime in. Other women he had charmed and discarded. Business associates he had burned. The whispers grew into a low, steady hum of negative buzz. His carefully curated online brand was being slowly poisoned. Amelia was still living in her bubble. Her social media was a highlight reel of her new, vibrant life. A smiling selfie of them at a winery. A gushing caption, asterisk, finally feeling like myself again. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag alive. Asterisk each post was a twist of the knife, but it also fueled my resolve. She was building her fantasy on a foundation of lies, and the tremors were just beginning. The most crucial piece of the plan involved her best friend, Claire. Claire had never liked Ethan. She had a good intuition and saw through his polished veneer. I knew she was the only person Amelia might actually listen to. Through a mutual acquaintance, I arranged for Claire to stumble upon one of the more detailed online threads about Ethan. It contained anonymous but specific stories that mirrored what Marcus had uncovered. I didn't need to do anything else. I knew Claire's loyalty and concern for Amelia would compel her to act. A few days later, Marcus called me. Phase 3 is a go. Claire confronted Amelia about what she saw online. And I asked, my heart pounding. Amelia blew up, Marcus said. Accused Claire of being jealous, of trying to sabotage her happiness. Said it was all lies from bitter exes. She's doubling down. Good, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. That's exactly what I wanted. Her defensiveness was a sign that the seed of doubt had been planted. She was fighting so hard because, on some level, she was terrified it might be true. The illusion was still holding, but the first cracks had appeared. Now, it was time to apply some real pressure. The illusion of a perfect life is a fragile thing. It requires constant maintenance, a steady stream of validation, and, in Ethan's case, a healthy cash flow. With their joint assets frozen and my financial contributions cut off, the first visible cracks in Amelia and Ethan's fantasy world began to show. It started subtly. The fancy dinners became less frequent. The weekend getaways ceased. Amelia's social media, once a vibrant travelogue of her new life, grew quiet. The silence was more damning than any sad post could have been. Claire became my unwilling barometer for Amelia's state of mind. They had reconciled after their fight, but their friendship was strained. Claire would call me occasionally, her voice a mixture of concern for her friend and a grim satisfaction that her instincts had been right. She put her car up for sale, Claire told me one afternoon. said they needed to be more financially responsible. That's not a phrase I've ever heard come out of Ethan's mouth. I knew what that meant. Ethan was getting squeezed, and he was pressuring her to liquidate her personal assets. The parasite was getting hungry. While their financial situation deteriorated, I moved on to the next phase, the public dismantling of Ethan's reputation. I took the notarized statements from his previous victims, Sarah, Elena, and the others, and packaged them with Marcus's investigative report. It was a damning portfolio of a predator at work. I gave it to Megan, a hungry young journalist I knew who had a penchant for taking down the city's self-styled titans. She worked for a popular online magazine that specialized in long-form investigative pieces. "This is explosive," Megan said, her eyes wide as she flipped through the file. "This guy is a sociopath. I can have this story ready to publish in 2 weeks." "Make it one," I said, and I wanted to be the cover story. While Megan worked on her exposé, I deployed another weapon. Marcus had uncovered that Ethan was trying to secure funding for a new tech startup, a vague, buzzword-laden venture that was almost certainly another scam. He had been courting a group of local angel investors. I found out who they were and sent each of them an anonymous, encrypted email containing a condensed version of Marcus's report. It was enough to raise serious red flags. 2 days later, Marcus called me, laughing. "You're not going to believe this. Ethan's big investor meeting was today." He got laughed out of the room. One of the investors told him he wouldn't trust him with his lunch money, let alone a seed round. The net was tightening. His financial prospects were drying up, and his reputation was about to be publicly executed. The day Megan's article was published, the city's social and business circles lit up. The headline was brutal: "The Casanova Con Man. How Ethan Thorne Seduces, Scams, and Destroys." The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, detailing his pattern of manipulation with quotes from his victims, their names changed for privacy, financial records, and a timeline of his deceit. It painted a picture of a man who was not a charming rogue, but a cold, calculating predator. The story went viral. It was shared thousands of times on social media. Ethan's name became synonymous with fraud. I imagined Amelia seeing it. I pictured her sitting in their rented apartment, the walls closing in, reading the words that confirmed her worst fears. I imagined the dawning horror as she recognized the patterns, the lies, the same lines he had undoubtedly used on her. Claire called me that evening. Her voice was somber. She saw it. "She's not talking. Not to me, not to anyone. She just shut down." "And Ethan?" I asked. "He's claiming it's a witch hunt. A smear campaign by jealous exes. He's trying to spin it, but no one's buying it. He's radioactive." Amelia was now trapped. She had alienated her friends, abandoned her marriage, and tied her fate to a man who had just been publicly unmasked as a monster. She had wanted to feel alive. I wondered what she was feeling now. The final blow was yet to come. The wealthy widow whom Ethan had scammed before meeting Amelia, emboldened by the public outcry and the support of the other victims, decided to refile charges. With the new evidence Marcus and I had provided, the district attorney's office was eager to pursue the case. I was at home, reading a book, when I saw the news alert on my phone. A photo of Ethan, his face pale and stunned, being led out of his apartment building in handcuffs. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, quiet finality. The game was over. I had won. But it felt less like a victory and more like a necessary, painful surgery had finally been completed. The cancer had been cut out. Now, the healing could begin. The silence that followed Ethan's arrest was different. It wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken silence that had first filled my house. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. The city's gossip machine churned for a few more weeks, dissecting every detail of Ethan's downfall, but eventually, as it always does, it moved on to the next scandal. I heard snippets about Amelia through Claire. Ethan, facing serious prison time, had cut all ties with her. He had tried, pathetically, to blame her for some of his financial misdeeds, a final, desperate act of a cornered rat. She was left alone in the expensive apartment they had shared, with a lease she couldn't afford and a reputation that was now inextricably linked to a convicted con man. She lost her job. Her company, wanting to distance itself from the scandal, had restructured her department. It was a quiet firing, but a firing nonetheless. She was toxic. Claire told me Amelia had sold her car, her jewelry, anything of value, just to stay afloat. She was a ghost, rarely leaving the apartment, avoiding contact with everyone she had once known. She's a wreck, Claire had said, her voice laced with a reluctant pity. She made a colossal mistake, and now she's living in the rubble of it. I think she finally understands. I listened, but I felt a strange detachment. Her suffering wasn't the goal. It was merely the consequence. The game had been about demonstrating the reality that lay beneath her fantasy. The demonstration was now complete. It was almost 2 months after Ethan's arrest that I heard the knock on my door. It was late, close to midnight. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, who it was. I opened the door. There she was. She looked older, smaller. The vibrant energy she had exuded, the very thing that she claimed Ethan gave her, was gone. All that remained was a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. Her eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, met mine. "James," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, the woman who had shattered my life. The woman whose life had now been shattered in turn. I stepped aside, holding the door open. She walked into my living room, her movements hesitant. It was a space she had never seen, the new apartment I had made my own. It was neat, orderly, and held no trace of her. She stood in the center of the room, looking lost. I don't know where to start," she began, her hands twisting together. "Start wherever you want," I said, my voice even, devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "It won't change anything." Her eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake, James. A stupid, unforgivable mistake." "I'm aware," I said, crossing my arms. She took a shaky breath. "I thought I wanted something else. Something more exciting. I thought he made me feel alive." She choked on the words, the phrase that had started all of this now a source of deep shame. But it wasn't real. None of it was. It was just noise. Chaos. The life we had, that was real. The quiet, the stability, the feeling of knowing someone had my back. That was being alive. I was just too blind and too stupid to see it. Her confession hung in the air. This was the moment I had been working toward, the culmination of my entire campaign. To hear her admit it, to see her broken and regretful. But the victory felt hollow. "And now?" I asked, my voice cold. "What do you want from me, Amelia? Absolution? A second chance?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't deserve that. I know I don't. I needed you to know. I needed to say I'm sorry. For everything." I stared at her, this broken woman who had once been my world. And in that moment, I realized the truth. My plan hadn't just been about exposing Ethan. It had been about this final, quiet confrontation. It had been about getting back the power she had taken from me that night at the dinner table. "You said he made you feel alive," I said, my voice low. "Well, let me tell you what you did for me. You woke me up. You showed me that I was living a life of complacency, that I was taking things for granted, including my own self-worth. In a strange, twisted way, Amelia, your betrayal is what made me feel alive again." She looked at me, stunned, as if she couldn't comprehend my words. "You don't get to come back," I continued, my voice firm but not unkind. "That door is closed. The life we had is gone. But you do get to start over, just like I did. You wanted a new beginning? This is it. The real, hard, messy version of it." I walked to the door and held it open. "Goodbye, Amelia." She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears, not of self-pity, but of a devastating, final understanding. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and walked out without another word. As I closed the door, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel hate. I felt a quiet, profound sense of release. The ghost that had been haunting me was finally gone. I walked to my balcony and looked out at the city lights. Marcus had been wrong. This wasn't just a story. It was a metamorphosis. Amelia's betrayal had been the catalyst, the fire that had burned my old life to the ground. But from those ashes, I had built something new, something stronger, something that was entirely my own. I had survived, and in the quiet peace of my own, reclaimed life, I was, for the first time, truly alive.